Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight in honor of the release of Jodi-Ann Burey's Authentic. Let's give a big round of applause. My name is Tyler. I'm a bookseller here at Skylight. Thank you. It's a good bookstore. Before I introduce these two lovely people, I'm just going to note that if you haven't gotten your copy of the book yet, we have a ton up front, and there will be a signing afterwards. And now, let me introduce them. Warrell is the author of Sweet Soft, Plenty Rhythm, and a finalist for Penn Faulkner Award for Fiction and the Barnes & Noble Discover Prize. Yes, a round of applause. Yeah. Long listed for the Andrew Carnegie Medal of Excellence in Fiction. Her writing has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, Lit Hub, Oprah Daily, Los Angeles Review of Books, Huffington Post, and other publications. She has attended residencies at the Bread Loaf Winners Conference and the Tin House Writers Workshop. Big round of applause. Exactly. Jodi-Ann Burey is a writer, critic, and sought-after speaker on race, culture, and health equity. Her essays appear in various arts, business, and literary publications. She has created and hosts the prose and poetry salon Lit Lounge, the People's Art, and the Black Cancer podcast. Once again, we are here to celebrate the release of her latest work, Authentic. One more big round of applause. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. This is my favorite bookstore. I always love to be here. So thank you so much for coming. Jodi-Ann, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And especially, I don't know if you've read this book yet, but if you have, even if you haven't, you're going to see how much work went into this. So I want to give her another round of applause. I really felt like it was such a pleasure to read, and I also learned so much. There's so much in here. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Because this book has so much in it, I'm also nerdy. I have a lot of questions, and I'm going to try something a little different this time. As I told Jodi-Ann, there were lots of lines that I thought were really interesting, and I wanted her to just riff on them. So I've got my riff bag, and I've got those lines in there.
Okay.
So what we're going to do every so often, I'm going to ask her to pick one out, and we'll just kind of talk about it.
Love that.
So, to get started, though, you're going to read.
Show the
I'm
art.
sorry. Yeah, of course. Let me put this back here to just
Okay, perfect.
even have more of a look at the beautiful book. So you're going to read for us a little bit, right?
I
And then
will.
we'll talk a little bit, and then any questions you have.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura, for doing this
Of course.
with me. We met in Key West a couple years ago.
I was trying to remember.
Like, you were coming out of the bathroom, I was going in. I was like, I'm just so proud of you. I don't even know you. I'm just so proud of you. Just your book was just everywhere.
Thank you.
So excited that you were just even so open with me, someone you don't even know.
Happy
so
to do it.
It's great to be in community with you. So thank you so much.
Of course.
I think I'll just read. Oh, I'm just like seeing people that I know.
Lots of fun
Hey,
people
Ryan,
are still going to be coming.
Oh, represent Bona. Okay. I'm just going to read. A lot of the thinking around this book is birthed in my spinal cord injury diagnosis. I also have a master's degree in public health. And so in a lot of ways, I see Authentic as a public health intervention. And so to honor that, the very first chapter is the scene where I was diagnosed and the foundation of all the work that I do. I want Black women to be healthy and well. This chapter is called The Call. Am I dying or what? I said to Dr. Singh the moment he entered the exam room. Dr. Singh had been my physiatrist for 2 years. We had long passed typical doctor-patient niceties. My physical therapist referred me to Dr. Singh after months of exercises, stretches, acupuncture, and ointments had failed to treat my chronic pain. She said I had a difficult case. That word, difficult, a common pejorative wielded against Black women who advocate for ourselves, made it hard to hear a difficult case and not difficult patient or difficult person. I was apprehensive at first, worried she just wanted to hand me off to another doctor who'd tell me nothing was wrong. But Dr. Singh was attentive and respected me as an equal partner in my care. That his office called so soon after I left the imaging center didn't surprise me. I ignored it anyway. The whole point of scheduling an MRI during my lunch break was to distract myself with work. I wanted to delay the frustration of yet another diagnostic dead end. My phone rang again and again. 3 missed calls in a row made it clear today was not a day for distraction. 3 missed calls plus an email asking me to come to the clinic veiled Dr. Singh's urgency thinner than a hospital gown. Doctors do not summon patients for nothing. I left work early. I rushed to his office. I hugged my stomach, trusting my gut comforted me. It settled best without any sugar on the truth. "You're not dying," Dr. Singh replied, "but you do have a tumor inside your spinal cord." Dr. Singh continued saying something about my cervical vertebrae, something paralyzed, something quadriplegia, something I'll be there with you every step of the way. His voice drifted. My mind left my body. I laughed, but Dr. Singh didn't hear me. Did Dr. Singh hear me? He pulled up my scans on his computer. I smiled as he traced the bulging oblong blob of gray inside my neck, the thinning tissues down my spine. A tumor, shaped like a boiled dumpling. The ones my mother cooked with rice and stew peas, my mother. How do I tell my mother? How do I tell her a dumpling is hurting my body? Which of the 78 medical descriptors for pain captured the 3 years it took to get diagnosed? Could any express the unnerving combination of relief in knowing and the fear knowing caused? Which words describe how much it hurt me to be so difficult just so doctors would take me seriously? Heavy, cruel, unbearable, wrenching, numb, terrifying, tender, exhausting. That's it. I felt exhausted. Something about a surgery consultation with a Dr. So-and-so in the morning brought me back to my body. Dr. Singh's presumption about my availability irked me. I wanted to tell him about all my project meetings in the morning, my business trips to Malawi and Belgium the following week. I wanted to brag that I had already booked a getaway to snowboard in Chamonix and how cool it was that I could do all this when my Jamaican mother grew up walking barefooted to school. Allegedly. Nothing spells American dream like a weekend frolicking in the French Alps. But I did not mention any of this once I realized Dr. Singh never left the exam room. He had scheduled with Dr. So-and-so before I arrived. No referral slips, no wait lists for the next available appointment. Nothing but this tumor mattered now. A hoarse whisper chiseled the dam in my throat. There was a tumor inside my spinal cord, I echoed, and let the hurt break free. Crises have a way of metastasizing our identities. Mention cancer, and people speak in this sentimental Hallmark card coo that sounds like they're telling secrets to a baby. Grief, however premature, weighted every conversation I had. So I named my tumor Ted. A bit of tumor humor to lighten the dread-soaked air suffocating everyone around me. How are you feeling about Ted today? Any Ted updates? Ted is an asshole. We need to get Ted out of your life. Friends and colleagues treated Ted like a toxic relationship. They were begging me to leave. The more they talked about Ted, the more consciously we uncoupled. I was not the crisis. I was just in a crisis. I was not difficult. Ted was. I chose the name Ted because it evoked passive-aggressive white guy energy. You know the type. The one at work who compliments your hair only to cite it as proof you lack executive presence and undermines your promotion. Ted is the guy who volunteers you to take meeting notes for a project you lead. When you call out your company's failure to hire more people of color, Ted says you're being difficult because don't you know these things take time? Ted is the guy who threatens to fire you and sometimes does when you disagree. Ted's grate the nerves, a fitting metaphor for actual nerve damage. I was a Black woman with a spinal cord injury. Between the tumor and daily exposure to racialized occupational violence, my back was breaking. I do this often, morph public health research about the corrosive, long-lasting health impacts of white supremacy into pithy shorthand for casual conversation, a habit I introduced to my colleague Dorothy in the years leading up to my diagnosis. Dorothy was the only other Black woman public health professional I shared an office with in my entire career. We both studied the research on weathering, a term coined by public health scholar Dr. Arlene Geronimus that describes the cumulative biological wear and tear on the body caused by racial stressors. Dr. Geronimus developed the concept of weathering based on findings that Black mothers who deliver during their prime childbearing years face greater mortality and low birth weight risks. No matter how much health, wealth, and education Black mothers attained, the stress of racism compounded and worsened birth outcomes. Dorothy and I would find each other in the office whenever something happened, as it often did, usually involving our colleague Linda. We'd clutch our fetus-free wombs and declare, "Linda is giving me a low birth weight baby." At times, we would replace Linda's name with whoever or whatever provoked us with seemingly benign racialized hostility, underutilized expertise, tokenized representation, ignored contributions, and imposed visibility on racial differences, like our hair, jokes we shared, and how much time Dorothy and I spent together. Our commiseration empowered us to confront these stressors together as they happened, deterring any learned instinct to internalize doubts against our competence and right to take up space. The low birth weight baby joke was our Ted, a way to detach our personhood from the true agents of infirmity. I'm like clapping for myself. Brian,
You should clap for yourself. Yeah, join us, Brian. I think we all know each other, or we all know a lot of each other. So I'm really glad that you read that part, in part because I had about 50 questions.
Yeah.
And I had to eliminate about 20. And one of them was about humor.
Yeah.
And I was going to talk about the TED, naming the TED. So I'm glad that you read that to show you that, along with everything else this book offers you, it's funny at times. So can you do what no writer really loves to do, but we kind of need to do to sort of set up the discussion?
Yeah.
Give us the elevator pitch. What is this book about?
I've been working on this, so apologies if it's a little rusty. This is the early part of my tour. But Authentic, it's a critical examination of modern work culture. Mm-hmm. And so the goal of it is to defend our individual and collective health and well-being against institutions that have this cyclical nature of trading on our identities as marginalized folks only when it is convenient and profitable. And so in order to make that argument, I truly leverage everything that I had. There's memoir, there's interviews with other professionals of color. Someone's in the room right now who's mentioned in the book. I talk about pop culture. There's a whole section on Insecure, The Good Place, which was my pandemic watch. There are conversations with my parents. And so there are a lot of cast of characters that you would usually expect from a book about work, but also a cast of characters that you're like, why are they here? Like my doctor, like everything's connected. Yeah.
And it's called Authentic,
Yes.
right? So the focus is really about authenticity.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to give everything away because I really encourage you to read it, but I wanted to share a couple of sort of features of authenticity that I gleaned, and then have you maybe talk about a definition or at least what it means to you. So Authenticity being true to one's personality, spirit, and character. A statement of agency and personhood. That is saying I'm a person, not just a worker. Aligning what you do in the world and in work with what you believe. And there's a lot more. So how would you sort of define, describe, talk about authenticity as it shows up in the book?
Yeah, so there are two levels. There's like, what does authenticity mean? Like, how do we understand it as a culture? And then there's authenticity narratives. How is authenticity leveraged within the institution? And so the way that the book is structured is to say, okay, there's this nebulous term, authenticity. What does that mean? And so each kind of section of the book is trying to take a look at it from a different angle. And so we're talking about, well, we have bodies. Bodies are pretty fundamental to personhood, right? And so what is authenticity as care for our bodies? Okay, what is the myth around authenticity? What are the ways that we talk about it? What are the hopes that we have for what authenticity is supposed to do for us? What it's supposed to do within our professional lives? What institutions want to glean from it? And then it's weird because people often talk to me like, oh, she comes from this corporate world. And I really don't. Most of my career has been in nonprofits. But when we're talking about like racial hostility within the workplace, people usually go to for-profit, widget making companies. Right. And so there's a whole entire section just on nonprofits because I think there's something even more corrosive about the mission-driven sector because what they're pulling for with their authenticity is something, certainly much deeper than how we normally think about authenticity. It's our values. It's the things that we believe in. Yeah. And so what are the ways that nonprofits can not only turn you away from maybe that particular organization, but oftentimes they can turn you away from doing mission-driven work at all. Yeah. What is the spectacle around authenticity, which is really thinking about the limits of representation. There's a really great conversation that I'm having with myself about why I'm obsessed with Serena Williams and why I think we're, especially as Black women, obsessed with Serena Williams and her as this kind of cautionary tale of the limits of Black excellence. And then there's a lot of cynicism in the book. I don't think it's like particularly hopeful. It is funny at times. I don't know if it's like a good time, talking about racism and injustice. But what is authenticity in terms of what do we refuse, right? What are the ways that the things that we say no to? That is also the ways that we define ourselves. Yeah. And so what is also authenticity as agency? And so looking at the origins of authenticity, its root is in authentis, which means to act on one's own authority. How far have we come from that?
This is an amazing answer already, isn't it? But keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are like the ways that the book is structured to think about authenticity. But I will say the hardest chapter to write was saying, okay, what makes me authentic? And I would ask everyone that when I interviewed them. And I'm like, why is everyone struggling? Like, it would take them 20 minutes to do that. And then I interviewed a friend of mine who's a journalist. So her instinct was to say, well, what about you? Girl, I'm asking the questions now, okay? It's my mic now. Right. And so then I was like, wait, this is actually pretty difficult because I couldn't figure out if it was even possible to define myself in a vacuum of how institutions define me. And so even if we think about Black hair as an example, I've been wearing my hair natural since sophomore year of college. When I cut my hair off, there were maybe 3 Black girls on campus who had afros. There was no YouTube. There was no 4C, no porosity. Like, we didn't have that. And so, okay, me wearing my hair in a natural hairstyle, is that me being more authentically Black? Okay, but if I'm in an industry or I'm in a particular circumstance or I exist in an era where, there are repercussions there are Supreme Court cases about Black women's hair. Right. And so if I subscribe to and I comply with straight hair expectations, is that not also authenticity? Yeah. Isn't my own desire for my survival and my livelihood also part of who I am? And so just really complicating, like, how do I define myself? What does authenticity even mean? And so once I found the lens of agency, a lot of that just kind of falls to the wayside. And, we're different people every day. And so I think even the question of what makes you authentic should be as mercurial as, the ways that we use the word.
It's interesting because I think these kinds of conversations start and stop at identity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that you push us further to talk about the authenticity, right, of those identities and the signifiers,
Yeah,
right?
exactly
Hair,
that.
clothes, language.
Speech, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the idea that you're asking us to examine not only what makes us authentic just as human beings, right? And we're LA, and we talk about that a lot, you know, being our authentic selves, but really concretely, how is your identity, or what is your identity truly as a human being with all of the characteristics that make it up? And then you engage with the workplace, and all kinds of other expectations are thrust upon you, and potentially not only shaping your experience in the workplace, but making it pretty hard.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right. What I was thinking, I've worked primarily in nonprofits and academia, same stuff, sometimes even worse.
Yeah, but they get the pass, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the shock, right, of like, I'm in an academic institution with people who are supposed to be creme de la creme thinkers, and I'm still dealing with stuff that...
Yeah.
So when you're just... we need to go out after this because I have so many questions. But... so when you were writing it, one of the things that I really enjoyed in the beginning, we're in 2020, right? And you're kind of walking us through 2020. I don't have to remind you what that is, but you're dealing with COVID, George Floyd.
Yeah.
You were working for, at the time, the store.
Yes.
Jodi-Ann doesn't name any places, but working at the store, you were asked to review a memo about MLK Day.
Yes.
Which leads you to tell us in the book, companies ranked high on best places to work lists are often not the best places to work if you're Black or disabled. Yeah. So at the same time, you were also dealing with the spinal cord injury.
Yeah.
So how did all of this come together? And thinking of yourself as a writer, you've done a TED Talk. How did everything sort of come together for this book? Why was this book necessary? And how did you decide to pull all of these different pieces? It's part memoir, you've interviewed people, research, your public health background.
Yeah.
How did it come together?
Yeah, you know, I don't know.
We never know. But, you know, people always want to know.
I know.
So we try.
Know. Well, I think when you have a book that has the title Authentic, it can be an incredible North Star.
Yeah.
Because I always go back to what feels right to me. But then it can be a lot of pressure, right? Of, is this the most authentic way for me to express this? So it was a little crazy making. But I think why I start the book through my own health journey is that when I was in the hospital, when you're dealing with any type of major health crisis or any type of major life crisis, really, and especially when you're being treated in the cancer center, you hear these platitudes all the time. One day at a time, you're a warrior, you're a fighter, we got this. And I'm like, do y'all know how long a day is when you cannot get out of bed, period, at all, much less by yourself? When you're dealing with excruciating pain for every single moment of every single day, do you know how long a day is? And so there was this way that I was, and through people who love me and just people who this is socially acceptable. Someone's going through a crisis, these are the narratives that you use. And they were not comforting to me. They just felt more isolating. And so I felt like a lot of rage, but also became really curious about platitudes, really curious about cliches. And so when I went back into the workplace, I quit my job at the org. I worked at a startup. It was a women's focused co-working space. This was in the #girlboss era. And they just sell air. It's just filled with platitudes. I don't know how these white ladies get all this money, but it's air. There's no product, okay? But they get millions and millions of dollars because the narratives are so strong. Right. And so then I just started pushing back against, like, imposter syndrome, that's bullshit. Come as you are, that's bullshit. Authenticity, bullshit. And I was just like, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. And so during the pandemic, when I got laid off, thank God, in this mass layoff at the store, I just asked myself, what if every negative thing every boss you've ever had said about you was true? But it was just inconvenient for them. So yeah, you are assertive. You are contrarian.
Yeah.
You do have a lot of opinions. Okay, how can I leverage that in a way that serves me?
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of this work came from with the TED Talk, and then building that into a book was really trying to figure out how to find my own language outside of the platitudes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most importantly, I think a Black woman could write every single one of these books here just with an eye roll.
Yeah.
All right, that is how much language exists in a Black woman's eye roll. And so what I was hoping to do with this book is to take that eye roll, like, oh, bring your full authentic self to work. Put that in a book. That's what this book is. Mm-hmm. And so that was the real drive, to find verbal language, written language for the physical language and the emotional language we have for this type of occupational violence that we deal with.
So you mentioned imposter syndrome, and I really enjoyed your discussion of, I mean, because if you feel like you suffer from imposter syndrome, I liked how you kind of turned that on its head.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not suffering from imposter syndrome. Maybe you're being held to standards and expectations that are virtually impossible to meet, right? Yeah. And then the other piece that I kind of wanted to tie that to, so you were talking about sort of around George Floyd and I think it's interesting. I think what happens in a lot of these, especially nonprofit organizations, but also in corporate environments, is that's what they do. They hire the people of color. They have the calendar somewhere that says be all that you can be or whatever it is. And then they think they've done it, right? Yeah. They're having the conversations. Yeah. And I really liked this line, Black women, especially in the aftermath of George Floyd, Black women were convenient and profitable. Yeah. Ouch, right? But we also know this. Yeah. And so how was talk a little bit about your experience. And then I don't want to go too far into where we are now, but I do want to talk about it and get your thoughts on it. But I also wanted to say, even though what you're talking about is difficult, I find it always really helpful to read something like this and have the truth be told. Yeah. And so you are equipped to kind of deal, right? Yeah. So even though you're not necessarily feeling like that was fun, right? Yeah. You feel like, okay, this is the world, and now I've got tools. So can you talk a little bit about that, Black women especially, and maybe even talk about publishing, because that's already, changing.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about 2020 is that we experienced like a kind of micro of that kind of boom bust of, okay, is it the political incentives around diversity, equity, inclusion? Yeah. As soon as the pandemic hit, most of the people that I know, people of color, women, people who occupied the people functions of organizations, HR, DI, et cetera, were the first that were fired and furloughed. Yeah. As soon as the bottom line was threatened, we lost our jobs. Yeah. A few months later, George Floyd is murdered, and there's this kind of burgeoning racial reckoning, they call. I cannot tell you the amount of emails that I got, even from the people who just fired me, to try to come back and help them respond to the moment, also for free for a lot of this too, right? And so it'd be like that. And so I'm like, wait a second. This is just, within a couple of months, this is what happens years. The 90s was a huge boom for Black sitcoms when the networks needed the money, right? As soon as they got their money, peace out, right? We're moving on to Friends, right? Insecure, right? We have this kind of boom bust. All right, they all got pulled off the platform. Legendary comes off the platform, like all of those things. And so it's just, what was complicated is like, how do I see myself through that? Because even a couple of years after COVID, I wasn't getting those emails and those phone calls anymore. Yeah. And my livelihood is depending on those emails and phone calls. And a friend of mine had said, well, don't worry, February's coming. And so...
You'll have your month.
Yeah, you'll have your month. And, everyone's going to be looking for a Black person. And I'm like, wait, what if I started thinking about myself like that? That the only way that I am valuable and useful is when I'm fitting within these institutional timelines. And so that kind of cyclical nature is what the book speaks to. And I was speaking so much to the cycle that when Trump was elected, I added some kind of cosmetic things.
The first time?
For 2024.
Okay.
So the book was more or less typeset by then.
Oh, right.
And so I went in, we're at the same press. They were not pleased. No, I know. They were not pleased with the amount of changes I was making after this book was typeset. Yeah. But it was important for me to just add a couple of details so that the reader knows that I know that this had happened. Yeah. But as I was going through the different rounds, the argument never changed. Because there's also a way that even now with this 300,000+ Black women who have lost their jobs, that is also useful for the right's political agenda. Yeah. They are signaling to their base that it's working, right? That it's their time now. Yeah. We don't have to bother with this. And a lot of these institutions that were so on the front lines of justice and, racial reckoning and diversity, equity, inclusion, abandoned every single one of those initiatives with glee. Mm-hmm. They're like, thank God. Like, I felt like I heard a massive exhale from these institutions once these political incentives change. So I feel like whether they're using people of color, Black women, folks who have any type of marginalization to meet their own ends, the ways that we're denigrated also serves the institution as well. And so my question is, how do I stay healthy in that?
Yeah. You kind of talked about, I did want to talk about DEI, and maybe we can do it a little bit now, because it's probably going to be the least pleasant part of the discussion, right? Because of what we're experiencing. But one of the things I appreciated about the way you discussed it is being honest about how it's being not only just used and exploited and everything else terrible that's happening with this particular regime, but also that there's a performative aspect of it, right? In a lot of these institutions. So can you talk a little bit about, I can assume what you might say, but how you're feeling about all of these efforts? How do we, as people who are either impacted directly by this or care about it, how should we deal with what we're facing?
I'll say I'm horrified. Yeah. It's horrifying. Yeah. America is built on symbols, right? The symbol of America never, ever aligns with the truth. Mm-hmm. USA #1, we ain't #1 in anything besides like
and
we're not.
Keep dropping.
Yes. So when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which of course have had different names over the years, but I think what was helpful for me in writing this book is to tie diversity, equity, and inclusion, what we call DEI now, the suite of things that includes is directly tied to the Civil Rights Act. It is directly tied to these protected classes and the fact that it is unlawful to discriminate against them as employees in the private sector. That's what that is for. Yeah. And so what we call DEI operationalizes the Civil Rights Act. And so there's part of that, though, because this is America, that DEI is built on symbolic structures, right? Symbolic civil rights. And so we have a couple of people in particular positions of power, but the actual like hiring practices and pay practices, compensation practices, they don't change. Right. And so we have representation. Look, it's advancing, things are changing. And that's why it can so quickly go, because it's a symbolic structure. Yeah. And so it doesn't mean that it's frivolous, because America cares about the symbols. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that the symbols are being attacked, it puts me in kind of a weird situation, because what am I supposed to do? Advocate for the symbolism? Advocate for the bullshit? Right. I wasn't happy with this in the first place. Right. But there's this sense of like, well, at least y'all were trying to pretend. At least we had this kind of, in social science research, it's like called social desirability bias. And so it's like really difficult to ask people to self-report accurately on behaviors that, maybe there's a social expectation. Even something as simple as like, how many times do you brush your teeth a day? Everyone's going to say twice. does everyone brush their teeth? I don't know. I don't know what you do, but you'll want to say that. And so we existed in this time for a couple of years where there was bias to be performative about, I care about diversity. I care about inclusion. I'm working so hard for equity within the workplace. They're not even pretending anymore. So it is horrifying about, how far it can go, because there's no even kind of social pressure to keep people in line.
Yeah. And not only when they had what they had in place, there was recourse, right? Yeah. Even if it was not ideal, we had a recourse because they were at least supposed to be pretending to care, and maybe some of them actually did. I just realized what time it is, so we're going to jump.
Okay. Let's do speed rounds.
Let's do the what?
It's really my fault. I'll answer shorter.
Oh, she's... Okay. I got the thumbs up. So I'm going to ask you a few more questions, and then I would love you to join our dialogue. Okay. So I've got some more, not necessarily lighter questions, but, looking forward. But before we do that, let's do at least one of these
let's do a few
riffs.
I love this.
There's so many really great just one liners, and I just wanted you to talk about them.
I will say I did an interview 2 days ago, and someone repeated something that I wrote, and he's like, yeah, I really thought that was a bar. And I'm listening, I was like, yo, that was a bar. But it's I didn't even remember his question. So hopefully I'm not sitting here gagging. I'm like, man, that is good. And I'm like, wait, what?
No, please, be proud. Yes.
Okay, this one's cool.
Okay, good.
We all embody inequity. So this comes from a paragraph where, and this was not difficult, but something I was thinking about in the book of, I set up in the author's note that I use we, us, I use a lot of collective narration. But what's cool, what I find cool, is that we takes different shapes throughout the book. Yeah. And so sometimes it's clear that I'm saying all people with some type of marginalization. Sometimes I'm talking about all people of color, Black people, Black women with disabilities. That we is very porous, throughout the text. And so there was this kind of stretch where I was kind of going on, and I was talking a lot about myself, but through this we voice. And I had to pause, and I said, we're all kind of dealing with this, right? When you're a person of color, we come through this ancestral diasporic legacy of enslavement, indentured servitude, genocide, that all exist in some way or another still today. And so the fact that I'm saying we, or the fact that I'm talking about Black people, I didn't want it to flatten that too much, that we kind of all are embodying inequity, even if they take different shapes and forms in our specific communities as people of color. We all have this kind of linked fate of racial marginalization that is all impacting and corroding our physical selves. Yeah.
Nice, huh? That's great. Yeah.
I'm going to keep these. I like
that. Please do. You can have all of them. Okay. So there's a statistic in there that I had never heard that really surprised me, that I'm going to share just because I feel like everybody should know this, and then I'm going to tie it to another question. Okay. So I was surprised to read the statistic that 76% of white-collar Americans hide their disabilities. 76%. So I want to tie that to this idea of visibility and disclosure, right? So you talk about, there's so many levels to this, right? We have the representation, everything around that, and then we have visibility. In some ways, you are visible regardless of whether you choose to, but in some cases with disability, it's up to you, I guess, to disclose. Yeah. And so I was reading this, or I didn't read it, I scanned a New Yorker article about the Trump administration's cuts to everything. Everything.
It's flagged as a...
Yeah, but especially around disability, right now especially. And there was a person that was quoted, a legally blind person, who said, do I even say I'm a person with disabilities? So I have so many questions about that, and I'll throw them at you and go where you'd like to. One of them is, are we going to get to a stage, especially with AI and especially with all the data they're collecting, where disclosure isn't even a question anymore? And then if you can talk a little bit about disclosure and visibility, the challenges of being visible, and the question of whether to disclose.
Yeah. So after my surgery, I used a cane intermittently for about 2 years. And then for about 3 years, every time I went through the airport, I would use wheelchair service because I just like physically couldn't handle it. And so as a Black woman, I had never experienced a marginalized identity that would require my disclosure for people to know that about me after I stopped using the cane. And so that's like the only part of my life where I know what it's like to be able to visibly cue this part of who I am. And I've made different choices throughout those years of, do I let you know when I started having a choice? Now, for some people, that could be about their queerness. That could be about their gender identity. For some people, that could even be about their race, right? Where they would have to actually disclose that they're a person of color if they're white passing. And so that was just like my personal experience with that. So I made a choice that there's the reality of my physical disability and there's disability identity. Am I going to take the identity of a disabled person on? And I just found so much community there. I found such an interesting way to think about myself, a way to think about the world. And there's the element of my disability that I love. I love being a disabled person. My mother hates when I say that I'm disabled because she's worried about stigma and that, like, as if being disabled is bad, right? I live in an environment, I live in a world that, you know, struggles to accommodate the things that I need. And then because my identity is invisible, I can also struggle with advocating for myself. And so even me sitting here, I had to ask Tyler twice. I said, the vents here it's too much on me. I have like a cold weather sensitivity that impacts my mobility. I have a neurological disorder. Like, it sounds crazy to you, but the first couple of minutes here, like, I was really in a lot of pain. And so thank you for accommodating that. But it took a while for me to learn how to advocate for that. And so what I've learned, though, is that for people of color, having a disability identity isn't necessarily important. So even our understanding of how many people are disabled isn't complete. If you have sickle cell disorder, if you ever had cancer, if you have long COVID, there are all types of illnesses and conditions that would quote unquote count as disabled or doesn't count as disabled because even that is socially constructed. Normally when things impact people of color and women, they don't count as disabilities, just you know, menopause is disabling, is it not? Right? And so does that count as a disability? Am I a protected class now because I'm going through menopause? Do I get accommodations? And so it really allowed me to critique systems in different ways. I have a huge moral issue with reasonable accommodations, requests, the way we treat disabled people within the workplace. And so do we disclose? Do we not disclose? Does disclosure make you more or less authentic? Sometimes I disclose, sometimes I don't. I don't really think that's the issue. I think what are ways that we can create systems that allow people of all abilities to be able to access, right? How do we do universal design? How do we have universal access to create spaces where you don't need disabled identity as the foundation for you to prove that you need something?
So I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and I'm telling you that so you can let your questions kind of percolate.
Thank you.
So talking about, I'm thinking of Ta-Nehisi Coates was talking to, I think, Stephen Colbert, and Stephen Colbert was like, are you happy? What's positive? Give us some hope. And he's like, there isn't any, and I don't feel obligated to give it to you. So I'm not suggesting that. But when you're thinking of, okay, so we know these things, we experience these things, everybody's going to read your book. How do we adjust? How do we situate ourselves in this reality and find a sense of authenticity and live our lives? And so there were a couple of things that you mentioned. Paying attention to our bodies. And then there was also this idea of caring, and we don't really have time for you to read it, but it was we really live in this moment of self-care, right? And it usually means getting some bath salts and stuff like that. But you're talking about something much deeper than that. So what are not the solutions, not the silver lining, but what do we do? How do we deal with these circumstances we find ourselves in?
Yeah, I mean, I was fighting the cynicism a lot. A lot. And I was talking to a college friend of mine, and he reminded me, like, the biggest trick that capitalism and these institutions play on us is that we're just all like sitting in a room at our own cubicles by ourselves, just like grind. And then he goes, but everyone's sitting in a room. You're still with people.
Yeah.
And so there became this like always looking to this North Star of where are our people?
Yeah.
You know, where do we gather beyond the institutional gaze? Where do we actually connect? And when I say institutional gaze, like, I don't work in tech, so I feel like I can speak openly about this, but like, and I've never been to Afro tech, so what I'm saying could just be ridiculous, but just work with me here.
We'll follow.
You know, there's a lot of corporations that sponsor these spaces where Black people gather. And so is Coca-Cola or Google or Meta going to sponsor a like how to navigate employment law panel?
Right.
How to sue your employer for racial discrimination? Are they going to sponsor that?
Right.
You know, these employee resource groups, they're sponsored by these companies. And so for our like labor laws, they cannot be acting like on behalf of workers. They cannot be functioning in any type of way that is like a union. And so there are these ways that we're gathering with people and we're building community, and the potlucks are great, especially our people. The food is always amazing, right? I love these community spaces. But what are ways that we are gathering and connecting with each other beyond the institutional gaze? And so for me, and this was a wake-up call for me, of especially as a writer, where is my community? Where can I just like talk about the things that I'm dealing with and how to navigate this? Where do we connect just as people?
Yeah.
So maybe we build something else. And so I was finding myself, as much as I was desiring community and wanting it, and then feeling like it was a value system of mine, I did not have those people. And so I think the best way that we care for ourselves is by being in community. The best ways that we find our authenticity is through the agency that we build with our relationships with others. And so even the simple question of like, how can I be more authentic? Even if we just change that I to a we, how do we be more authentic? Well, that's a space for possibility. That's now we're looking at the systems, we're looking at environments, we're looking at the things that we can build together. Yeah. What are the spaces where we can feel good with each other, healthy, well?
Yeah.
And that kind of side of possibility is what makes me excited for the book, makes me excited for my own career. And honestly, my main goal, and I don't know if anyone represents a company here, but I want to make unruly employees. And so hopefully that gets accomplished with this book.
I'm not asking a second question. That's good.
Wait, can we do another one?
Yeah? I'm glad you like that, because I was like, is this dorky or not? Do you have questions? We'll definitely do at least one more. But what questions do you have for Jodi-Ann?
I'm just wondering, when you talk about us advocating for ourselves in the workplace, for at least the last couple generations, we've been told we need to do that with patience, and like we're educating the people who are doing us harm, hoping they will become better and not do it to the next one.
Yeah.
Has that been fruitful labor?
No.
Do we still have to keep doing it?
No. So what I love about that is, and we have Diane here, my public health sister, right? There's this fundamental thing, at least where I went to school for public health, that information is not enough to change behavior, right? There are plenty of people who are actively smoking right now that know that smoking is bad for them. There are people that know that texting and driving is incredibly dangerous, and they text and drive. Yeah. Information is not persuasive enough for behavior change. And so how can we unlearn that in our relationship with institutions? Let 2020 teach you. They should have known a whole lot before 2020. If they didn't know then, they knew. If they didn't know before then, they knew in 2020 because everyone was talking about it. That information about the way that people of color, queer folks, disabled folks experience the workplace, they have that information, and they are not doing anything about it. They don't operationalize it. And so what does it look like for us as workers when we are no longer buying into this idea that just because someone knows better, that they do better, right? So it's not the goal of the book, and it is not the goal of my personal work to educate people on things that they already know and are actively ignoring. Whether they pretend or not, it depends on kind of what's happening in the culture. But the bottom line is that they know and they don't give a fuck. And so how can I give a fuck about myself and the health of my people?
Is a lack of empathy, would you say?
A lack of empathy, or I have a lot of empathy for myself.
You mean the organizations?
The employers, I think, you know, I mean, we can have larger conversations about capitalism and all of that, but there are very few incentives for us to act in our collective interests, right? And so push come to shove, we're going to go where the rewards and the incentives are. And in this country, rewards and incentives do not lie in social justice and equity. It just doesn't. That's sad.
Well, and
but
it seems like,
I don't know.
you know, even,
I mean, honest.
Yeah, I mean, in the corporate environment, we all know, right? We all understand that it's the bottom line, but it's the same in academia. These are they are businesses, nonprofit organizations are trying to appeal to, that's why so many of them are folding right now, because they're folding to all kinds of.
Yeah. I mean, what I call in the book, like, where does all the money, where does philanthropic dollars come from? Mm-hmm. You know, so after a while, I spent most of my career in nonprofits. I'm like, I'm a foot soldier for philanthrocapitalism. Mm-hmm. The money that I get to do all this good work is coming from someone that is trying to buy favors or curry, like, you know, positive feelings about what they do. Yeah. And so even the way that, you know, nonprofits, their funding structures operate. Right. You know, we'll have a funding cycle in public health. Hey, here's $100,000. What can you do in a year? You cannot change behavior in a year. Mm-hmm. I can give out contraception. I can, like, do those things. I cannot show you measured behavior change within that. It took, 30 years for people to wear seatbelts?
And then if you can't show these results, then you might lose your funding, right?
You might lose your funding. And so what does it mean to try to maintain that funding? Yeah. You start doing some things that really compromise, I think, your moral health. Yeah. Yeah.
Other questions for Jodi-Ann? I'll use my bag while you're thinking.
Okay. I love this.
Good. I'm so glad.
Okay.
And then, okay.
Meritocracy is our greatest myth. That's a bar. So this comes in a chapter, a section where I was talking about, I got selected to be a TED speaker in 2020. And I wanted to decline that because I was worried that I was being picked to kind of shield the organization from criticisms that they don't have enough Black speakers. And so I started kind of writing the email like I was going to decline. And I'm like, wait a second, this is America. Yeah. Especially for Black women, it does not matter how many degrees you have. It don't matter what school you went to. It don't matter how many certificates you have. You can be overqualified to the wazoo. Yeah. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, Stacey Abrams, and they will still treat you like you didn't deserve your spot. Right. They don't think Black women earn anything. Right. So why am I trying to appeal to meritocracy when it doesn't exist? Yeah. Yeah.
And when they don't, well, I'll let you have the last word on that.
Yeah.
One more question I'm being told, and I want it to be you. Yes.
I was thinking about what you said about community towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
And even outside the institutional gaze, I, over the years, have found myself to be just kind of skeptical of the possibility of authenticity in community. We pay a lot of lip service to it. We use it as a means of organizing, but I still feel that it's hard to gauge, or at least I have found it hard to gauge too, even when I'm surrounded by ostensibly who would be my community
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering how, is it a matter of knowing that we are part of it? How do we know that we are part of an authentic community?
That's a good question.
It's a good question.
Yeah. That's a really good question.
And or workplace, an authentic workplace.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. I think, what I'm trying to get at in the book is, and even kind of calling my own self out, I believe in community. I believe in these relationships, and that's how we're going to save ourselves, and this is how we're going to defend capitalism and all that kind of stuff, or fight against capitalism, not defend it. Fuck that. But I didn't actually have those relationships. I wasn't activating on that. I wasn't showing up for people in ways that they were showing up for me. People were not showing up for me the way that I had hoped. Yeah. You make plans, you cancel. You talk about things that you see on people's Instagram, but you don't actually know anything about them. And so for me, it's about just trying. I'm telling you, after the isolation I experienced after my surgery, isolation that we all experienced during the pandemic, community is truly like the best and only answer that we have. But it takes work to be in relationship with other people. It takes vulnerability. It takes unlearning. What are the ways that we can adapt like an abolitionist framework in our everyday lives? I've been really struggling with that and what felt confronted with that in writing this book. What is that at its fundamental level? Can you listen to what other people need? Yeah. Can you help meet those needs? If someone does you wrong, do you throw people away? Do we have this kind of carceral logic in our everyday lives? And so I'm dealing with that constantly because we've been trained that it's only success and status and, achievement only looks a certain way. Yeah. And I've been really trying to push back against that. And so just like one example since I started writing this book is creating Lit Lounge, The People's Art. It's a reading series in Seattle. I asked a friend of mine we used to work together to work on it with me because I wanted to be in community with other people. The very first question she asked me was, is this supposed to be profitable? Do you want this to be profitable? And I said, absolutely not. We are doing this for the community. It's like $10 for a ticket. We give away food. Yeah. I went to a local bookstore. I dropped $1,200 just on books to give away. Yeah. And as I was saying, hey, do you want a raffle? Do you want to win these books? Do you want a raffle? And they're like, oh, how much is the raffle ticket? Write your name down on a Post-it note and get you a book. Yeah. So even in these small ways, how do we build community that's outside of capitalism? How do we build community that's outside of these transactions? And I think we build from there. What I was struggling with is that I wasn't even doing that in any type of way. And I didn't like that. Yeah.
Jodi-Ann, thank you for writing this book.
Thank you so much.
Thank all of you for being here and supporting it.
Thank you.
That's my pleasure. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.